Let's talk more about the preparedness of the country for a no-deal Brexit, because Joe Owen from the independent think tank, the Institute for Government, is one of the authors of a new report which has been looking into how ready we are in the event of a no-deal Brexit. Welcome. What's the conclusion?
Well, I think it's looking at it now with so little time to go, you'd have to say it's very unlikely we will be ready. And part of that is a reflection of challenges of getting new systems up and running, new people on the ground. But it's also just a reflection of what a humongous task this is to do within just 3 years. And there is so much that is not within the government's control in order to be ready. So a whole host of businesses will need to be ready to adapt to new rules, new regulation, new paperwork, new IT systems. And then there's the big question of how the EU responds. A lot of this, the UK is having to kind of guess and has spent a lot of time trying to work out how it thinks the EU will respond. The EU has said so far that we will apply the letter of the law. The letter of the law is going to mean significant disruption, particularly in areas like the ports. But some think that actually maybe, you know, if the time came, the EU would act more pragmatically. But that's a very difficult basis
things we literally
for people
don't,
to plan on.
We just don't know then how it would happen in the event. Give us some specific examples of if processes were followed to the letter, as you're saying the EU is indicating it will be. You gave the example there of an area like ports. Give us some other tangent, because there are loads of examples out there in the media of what might happen. But I mean, how much can we absolutely bank on?
So I think a good example is around airports and aeroplanes and flights. So letter of the law would have been that UK flights didn't have a legal basis necessary to carry on flying to the EU, but what the EU has said is that in that area, and this is one of a few areas where they've said something like this, they would make a unilateral step to give the UK 12 more months for continuation. So what we will see in this big area, there will be, in this sort of whole host of areas, there will be individual circumstances where the EU might be willing to take a unilateral measure to mean that things flow with greater continuity than they would if they applied the letter of the law. But we don't know that until we get some certainty from them.
So if they can do it with the airports, why not with everything?
Well, this comes to the question of whether the EU is willing to give a departing member state who leaves without a deal with 39 billion in its back pocket, uncertainty around citizens' rights and around the Irish border, whether it will say you can carry on as if you were a member state and we'll continue allowing things flowing through the ports. They will have to apply the letter of their law, and there may be opportunities for them to take unilateral measures. But you know, the idea of them just bypassing laws for a departing member state, I think, will meet with a great amount of consternation across Europe.
So what we've heard from Jeremy Hunt today is that Britain may need to delay exit from the European Union if we're kind of on the cusp of a deal towards the end of March. Is it clear how long different processes might take around that? I mean, at what point could we go to the EU? Because 27 nations would need to agree a delay and say we do need a little bit more time.
In terms of an extension for Article 50, I think a lot will depend on what the extension is for, how long we're asking for, and whether the EU thinks that is realistic and achievable. So if it is an 11th hour request because the key piece of legislation to implement the deal is stuck in Parliament and hasn't gone through the right number of votes yet, and there's, you know, the end is in sight, then I imagine it was, you know, it's relatively straightforward for them to say we could give you a few more weeks or days or whatever it is. If come mid-March the UK says, and there's another vote in Parliament that says we want to change the backstop and we want to change different elements of the deal, the EU's approach to then granting an extension will be very, very different. So I think it all depends, and what Jeremy Hunt was talking about this morning was this key piece of legislation that will be required to implement the deal in UK law. Lots of people think that this so-called meaningful vote is the big parliamentary hurdle, but that then needs to get turned into legislation. So there will be vote after vote after vote after vote on that. And that is where the risk lies for government in timing out, even if they can get a deal in their preferred schedule in a couple of weeks' time.
Joe, Owen, thank you very much. Thank you.